Welcome to Sawmill River Audubon's community gathering today. We're just going to take an hour out to celebrate our past year of connecting people, birds, and other wildlife in their habitats. So I'm Ann Swain. I'm going to do a quick introduction here and a look at some coming events. And it's my pleasure to welcome you first tonight. Here's our lineup. Here's what we have for you in the next hour. The welcome and announcements I'm doing now. Our board president, Valerie Lyle, will be up next after me with some images and stories from the past year. And our treasurer, Tom McEnerney, will have a few words, which I think you'll be interested to hear. Then Sam Plyter is queued up to tell us about his adventures up in Maine as our 2021 Larry Light Youth Scholarship recipient. We're glad you're here, Samuel. Sam is coming to us from the other corner of the state, from Erie County, so that's pretty neat. And then Larry and Steve are ready to share some images and stories from our May 2021 Yellowstone trip. It's our feature presentation tonight in the middle of our hour. Then we're going to have our birding quilt raffle drawing, and then a short multimedia finale that we always do at our dinner, just a 3-minute look at faces and places of the last year. So about that quilt sale, we're going to close the sales in about 5 minutes. So by the time I finish my announcements, the sales will be closed. If you want to jump on quick and buy a ticket, you can do that if you haven't yet. It's a pretty amazing quilt, made for us by Jean Sparrison. Al DeLune, it's absolutely beautiful, and actually online you can see other pictures. So a couple of next upcoming events real quickly. Our twice monthly bird chat continues this Tuesday. Mike Bachnick is going to be our conversation guest on bird chat. We have some intro 15-minute look at current sightings, announcements. Then our middle half hour, like tonight, is somebody special, and that'll be Mike this coming Tuesday. And he's kind of the keeper of Westchester County's bird list and rarities, and he'll have some interesting stories for us, especially how climate change is changing both the birds we see and when we see them. So that's usually twice a month, sometimes changes. Change coming up, I'll mention in a moment. Same Zoom link all the way through to December. So once you register, you'll have the link and you'll get a reminder before each chat. But the second Tuesday in October, the one after Mike Bachnick, we won't have bird chat because we've got something pretty special I'll tell you about here. David Sibley Live. This is a big deal, and a big thanks to Elise and Stu Landesberg. Elise at Hendrick Hudson Library had the brainstorm of this. It's being sponsored by 12 Westchester County libraries, and all 5 Westchester County Audubon chapters are helping to cross-promote it. We expect to use all 500 Zoom seats, so make sure you register, get in on that, because once we fill, we fill. And that should be, excuse me, a really interesting program. David Sibley talking about his latest book, What It's Like to Be a Bird. Our November program is just the Sawmill, not co-sponsored one, and it's going to be very special too. Peter Post, who's an amazing photographer, is going to be sharing some of his images, like this bay-breasted warbler, and talking about tips for photographing wildlife. And speaking of photographing wildlife, don't miss this. We're actually going to have an exhibit at the Hendrick Hudson Library in February, and if you're interested in having your pictures considered for that, you need to submit them by November 15th. There's a link online for you to upload photos for that review. And just supporting us with birds, just a shout out about our seed sale that continues. You can pick whatever day you want to pick up, and we'll queue it up for you. So check that online. And just wherever you're from and wherever you usually buy your seed, just a heads up that prices are really expected to spike this fall because of climate impacts, pandemic distribution impacts. So you want to get your orders in wherever you get them pretty soon. So we're a member of a much bigger network of Audubon chapters and bird clubs across New York State. And one of the ways that all those groups connect is through the New York State Ornithological Association, or NYSOA. And their annual meeting is coming up next weekend, so you may want to check that out and see what that's all about. nybirds.org. The meeting this year is hosted by Southern Adirondack Audubon, and Sawmill River Audubon is going to be hosting the 2023 meeting, hopefully in person. This one's virtual. So for those birders out there, you might consider getting in on our fall birdathon. Teams are forming now. We can help you form a team too. Compete for fame and glory There's a team registration fee that helps support Sawmill River Audubon, or you can divide it up with another chapter or bird club. You can have the money go to them as well. So it's kind of neat. We do the heavy lifting at Sawmill and help your other group raise money as well. So registration deadline's coming up Thursday, October 7th. And for people, whether you're just starting out at birding, you just want to try it out, or you are experienced, you might want to get in on our bird walks. We draw from the waiting list every week, and there are some walks with spaces this fall, even before the waiting list. So it's my pleasure now to turn over the program to Sawmill River Audubon's board president, Valerie Lyle, who'll be giving us an overview of our connecting people with nature over the past year. Hi, Val.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today as Sawmill River Audubon celebrates another year of connecting people with nature. We're disappointed we still can't gather in person, but we're happy that we have technology that allows us to stay connected. I'll start by reviewing some business information, followed by a recap of our activities during the past 11 plus months. 2020 was another record year for our annual fund drive, with a total of over $63,000 received from donors like you, $18,000 in employer matching grants, and an additional $36,000 in matching funds contributed by a generous anonymous donor. As of September 10th, the 2021 annual fund drive has brought in $43,000 in individual contributions, which will be matched once again this year, and another $2,000 in employer matching grants. Annual fund donations provide the largest part of our annual operating revenue, with the balance coming from other sources such as birdseed sales, education programming, and a carefully determined percentage from our endowment fund. We're grateful to Treasurer Tom McEnerney for his astute guidance, and to Finance Committee Chair Phil Heidelberger for his careful management of our endowment. Their dedication to the well-being of Sawmill enables our ongoing work. At our March 1st, 2021 board meeting held via Zoom, 2 new board members were elected, Eric Anderson and Jenny Stern. Both have jumped right into important roles with us, Eric serving on our Finance Committee and Jenny taking on responsibility for our newsletter. 7 directors whose terms were ending that month were also reelected to new 3-year terms, and the current officers were reelected for another 1-year term. We're saddened to hear of the recent passing of Joanne McCauley, a 12-year member of our board. She also served 2 stints as secretary, provided much assistance at our special events, and enjoyed traveling with us. We also note with sadness the passing earlier this year of Jim Gamellan, a conservation champion in Mount Kisco, who was also part of our Monday morning birdwalk community. We will miss both Joanne and Jim. We regret to announce Donna Lassiter's retirement, both from our board and from her role as Sawmill's garden coordinator. Over the past 10 years, her work has given us 2 very beautiful native plant gardens that attract large numbers of pollinators and provide refuge and food for birds and other wildlife in all seasons. Donna also documented the wildlife benefits of the plants in both gardens, as well as in the surrounding arboretum. This information is available on our website. We're deeply indebted to her for this legacy, for the gardens that exist because of her dedication and hard work, and for sharing her knowledge with us. Sawmill will miss her greatly. Despite the disappointing continuation of many pandemic restrictions, we've been quite active since our October 2021 virtual gathering, with over 50 in-person field trips, 20 bi-weekly bird chats on Zoom, 16 birding workshop Zooms for local libraries and other Audubon chapters, 10 public Zoom programs, including the 3-part series Bird's Eye View of Food, talks with noted authors Carl Safina and Tom Stevenson, and a Zoom program on geocaching led by board member Lynn Salmon and her husband, John. Our Nature Book Club has continued to meet via Zoom about once every 2 months, reading a wide variety of interesting books, both old and new, with lively and fun discussions expertly led by board member Kathleen Williamson. In addition to the small group bird walks for adults that were introduced in spring of 2020, in 2021, we introduced 2 new series of educator-led walks for youth. Young Birder Walks for youth ages 8 to 17, and Nature Explorer Walks for younger children accompanied by a caregiver. These walks were supported by a bequest from longtime SMRA member and photographer Ed Mertz, and we plan to continue them in 2022. The Lynetta Explorer Bag program continues to expand, with 3 new libraries signing up this year. We thank LL Bean for providing a generous donation of backpacks for the Explorer bags this year. We continued our partnership with the Rewilding School, which runs a forest preschool at Britton Brook Sanctuary, and will expand this fall to offer a preschool nature program at Prine Sanctuary. These programs are entirely outdoors and they run throughout the school year. Chappaqua Friends Nursery also offers a 1-day-a-week forest preschool program at Prine. Because of the pandemic, school-based education programs were suspended during the 2020-2021 school year, but we were encouraged a couple of weeks ago when we learned that all 18 fifth grade classes at Ossinings's Roosevelt School will have fall Audubon field trips at Rockefeller State Park Preserve. We continued trail maintenance and habitat improvement with the help of a small group of volunteers led by board member Michael Mattias. Additional help was provided by a troop of Boy Scouts. Hundreds of native wildflowers, shrubs, and trees provided by several state programs and 1 donor were planted at Britton Brook, Prine, and Graff sanctuaries this year, and our volunteer trail walkers continued to monitor and report on conditions in each sanctuary. An Eagle Scout project by Jonathan Wiedenheft added 5 owl nest boxes in our sanctuaries, 2 each in Prine and Britton and 1 at Pinecliff. We thank both Jonathan and the box sponsors who provided funds for the materials needed. Here's hoping for new tenants. Our board members and chapter members continue to come up with new ideas to educate and add interest for members of our community. Board member Carrie Andrews hosted a very successful birding tea in her home on June 19th, using that opportunity to talk about the importance of native plants and bird-friendly habitats. Board members Earl DePass and Steve Rappaport recently came up with the idea of placing a feeder cam at Prine Sanctuary. They've already completed planning and are seeking funding support for this camera, which will provide a continuously available online live view of our bird feeders for use by the public and our school programs. SMRA member and author Joe Wallace has been writing a regular nature blog for us. His very engaging and informative writing on an eclectic mix of topics is a must-read. For the first time ever, thanks to the work of board member Louisa Gagliardi, we published a calendar featuring local bird photography, and it was a sellout. Our 2022 calendar with more local bird photography will be available soon. In addition, we're holding a photography gallery exhibit in February at the Hendrick Hudson Library. The deadline to submit your photos for consideration for this exhibit is November 15th. I also want to give a shout out to Ann Swaim and SMRA members Carolyn Lamb and Charlie Roberto, whose dedicated monitoring and engagement with the County Parks Department over the past 3 years helped ensure the success of the grassland restoration project at Croton Point. Grasshopper sparrows and bobolinks returned to nest there this summer, and as most of you are probably aware, 5 dick thistles, a quite rare species in this area, chose the grassland as their summer home and established 2 successful nests that produced at least 2 fledglings. Several species of fall migrant sparrows, including Nelson's sparrow, yet another rarity, have been seen there recently, along with returning raptors such as kestrels, northern harriers, merlin, and peregrine falcon. In addition to presenting webinars on solar farm siting and on the environmental impacts of our food choices, our advocacy committee, led by Vice President Tom Ruth, has weighed in on several local solar farm proposals and created a statement urging that habitat and wildlife impacts be considered in all solar siting decisions. On their agenda for the coming year are webinars on plastics recycling and meadow plantings on solar farms, and developing plans to promote conversion of large-scale non-forested properties such as corporate office parks to wildlife-friendly habitat. All of this is made possible by the dedication of our volunteers, the support of our loyal members and friends, and the hard work of our board and talented staff, Ann Swaim, Executive Director, Ellen Heidelberger, Office Manager and Historian, Danny Ferguson, who maintains our sanctuaries, and educators Pete Samonson and Patricia Mutolo. I would also like to emphasize Anne Swaim's indispensable role in guiding us through all the changes that we've had to make in the past 18 months. Her professionalism and skill in running Zoom programs, cited as recently as 3 days ago from someone who attended our Thursday program, and her incredible energy and willingness to adapt and do what needs to be done to keep Sawmill's mission on track have been fundamental to our ability to survive and grow in this now not so new but still disorienting social environment. In addition, we're deeply grateful to all of you for your participation in our programs, your volunteer work, and your financial contributions, which have enabled Sawmill River Audubon to survive and thrive during these very unsettling times. We wish a safe journey to better times for all members of our community, for our wild places, and for the planet. Thank you for joining us in this work. Now I'd like to introduce our treasurer, Tom McEnerney, for his treasurer's report. Tom?
Okay, so my financial report relates to 2020. And the good news for 2020 is that the COVID-19 pandemic did not have a significant adverse effect on SMRA's financial condition. Although the pandemic resulted in birding trips to Yellowstone and South Africa being canceled, guide and lodging deposits were either refunded or rolled over to the following year, and most participants committed Sawmill to retain their deposits for a future trip. In addition, school programs and field trips and the annual dinner were canceled, and so SMRA lost profits associated with these activities. However, these revenue shortfalls were more than offset by a $16,000 payroll protection plan loan received by Sawmill and by, as Val mentioned, a very successful annual fund drive inspired by a matching grant program from a very generous anonymous donor. So with respect to operating revenue and expenses for 2020, which is unaudited at this point, our audit is still not completed for 2020. During 2020, Sawmill had about $167,000 of operating revenue, including about $78,000 of donations. Operating expenses were about $207,000, resulting in a net deficit of about $40,000. The operating deficit was covered by withdrawing $23,000 from Sawmill's endowment and by $17,000 of cash on hand at the beginning of the year. In addition to the foregoing, there were about $150,000 in addition to the endowment, consisting primarily of a bequest and the matching grant funds from our anonymous donor. A copy of my report is available at Sawmill's office and upon request.
Thank you, Tom. All right, so it's going to be my pleasure here, Sam. We're going to switch over to a different screen share in a moment. I'm going to be showing the slides through my computer, and Sam is just going to give me a next prompt when it's time to switch slides. So let me just do a quick intro, Sam, and we'll let you get started. Thank you for being with us tonight. Sam Plyter is our 2021 Larry Light Youth Scholarship recipient. And if you don't know about our Larry Light Youth Scholarship program, it was begun by the Light family in memory of Larry Light. Larry's brother and sister are, I think, online with us tonight, so we want to give a special greeting to Susan Light and David Light. This program has funded hundreds of youth at this point to have special experiences in the environment and nature, some of whom have gone on to practice that as their profession, some in other professions, but more environmentally active and knowledgeable as a result of their experiences. So Sam Plyter is a junior at Clarence High School, which is actually in Erie County. Because of our connection with the New York State Young Birders Club, we're actually able to network out our youth scholarship program even beyond Sawmill River Audubon's area. I'm just going to quote one quick thing about Sam that he put on his application. He says, "I've always loved birding since I was very young and decided early on that I wanted to be an ornithologist. I love hiking and exploring nature, and I love bird watching, and I pick up garbage when I do so." I like that. I use eBird every time I go hiking and outside to bird. I'm very interested in using my love of nature to improve the environment and prevent further damage. My dream is to go to Cornell because of the location, and it's my best option if I want to go into ornithology. I've been working to accomplish this goal by doing my very best in school. So nice, good words, Sam. Thank you for sharing those with us. And we're really looking forward to hearing how things went for you at the Audubon camp in Hog Island this summer. So I'm going to ask you to go ahead and start and just simply say next when you want a new image, okay?
All right. All right. So hello, everyone. I am Samuel Plyter, and today we'll be given a presentation of the Hog Island Audubon camp. All right. You can hit the next one.
Okay. Let's see. There we go.
All right. So my flight landed sometime during the day. We flew up there to Maine. But by the time that my mother and I had gotten a car to drive to my aunt's cottage, which is closer to the area where the camp was, it was dark out, so I didn't get to see much of the town, unfortunately. But in the morning, I took pictures of the shore, and it was beautiful there. I'd never seen really such beautiful rocky shores, so that was very cool. Can hit the next. All right. These are pictures I took of the shore below my aunt's cottage. I had never been to Maine before this trip, so getting to see the rock formations at the shore in the morning was very cool. In the bottom left, there's one that looks like a lightning bolt. I was fascinated. Next. All right, so I, of course, did not take the picture at the bottom right, but the top left picture is a picture I took of a little pond that they had on the island. I left my aunt's house around 1 to make it to the dock where we were all meeting. The island itself was only a short pontoon ride away from the mainland. When I arrived on the island, we were offered snacks and shown our cabins before we eventually all met in a circle and introduced ourselves. They gave us the rundown of what activities we would be doing, meals, bedtime, etc. Everyone I met was very kind, and I felt very comfortable staying there, and our rooms where we stayed were also very cozy. Thanks. All right, so one of the many highlights of the week was the trip to Monhegan Island that our group took the first day. There were 2 groups because there were 30 campers, so they split them in groups of 15. So we went the first day, and we left early in the morning and took a very long boat ride to the island. On the way, we passed through a massive fog that looked like a wall before we entered it. And on every side of the boat, it appeared that there was no horizon. And on the way, we saw a number of seals, porpoises, petrels, and other seabirds. After landing on the island, I was amazed at how beautiful it was and the small town that was there as well. Next. We began a hike around the island to see the cliffs and nature trails. I don't have a camera, but I used my binoculars and phone to take some pictures of a pheasant family that were staying there. Next. Again, I was amazed at how beautiful the island was. We came to a shore where there had been a shipwreck to eat lunch. And so you see in the picture in the middle, there's a old ship that's rusted away for I'm not sure how long, but the bottom is a photo from the mountain. It was cool, very cool seeing the entire side of the island, but I was surprised how large the island actually was. Next. These are pictures that I took from the top of the cliffs after we hiked all the way up them. We could see gulls nesting below on the cliffs in the picture on the left. The rocks there are covered in droppings there, and that's where a lot of the gulls were staying. I believe we even saw a great shearwater out in the distance using somebody's scope, which was confirmed and recorded, and that led to one of our counselors eventually doing a headstand later that week as tradition for seeing rare bird. Next. We made our way down the trail away from the cliffs and headed back to the dock. The weather was much nicer in the afternoon. The water was actually so clear that I saw a cormorant swimming around under the water, nibbling at things. And I thought that was very cool because, I was diving under there. And the picture in the bottom right is where it was sort of swimming around. It was very cool. Next. All right, so all right. We circled around the whole island after our trip, and this was much later in the day. I think we spent the majority of the day on the island, hiking around and recording birds and seeing the island. And so after we circled around, we headed toward Egg Rock Island, which is an island that the puffins live on. Later during the week, we talked more about the puffin project, and it was cool to learn how they were brought back onto the island. Later that week, we also met the founder, Dr. Stephen Kress, just by chance during a bird walk, which is really neat. Next. I don't have many pictures of the Egg Rock Island, but I did get some great pictures from my phone of puffins that were close by. There were great opportunities if you did have a camera. As you can see, some of us have better equipment than others. I wasn't bummed out though, because just seeing the puffins was amazing. And the photo in the bottom right is a picture from a friend that I met at the camp with his camera. Next. So on the second day, the other group went to Monhegan, and we went to like the mainland, and we learned about bird banding and how it's done and what it's used for. So there are some pictures of the people there like teaching us how to band, and it was cool because they had the nets right there, and so we were watching it being done. Next. All right, so we hiked around, after banding, we took a hike around the mainland and saw some bird species that we hadn't seen on the island yet. Even though the views from the side of the island were great, from the side of the road were great, I didn't expect it to be as lush and nice as it was up there. I was really surprised by how much moss and lichen was covering everything. Next. We hiked around that Hog Island a few times over the week, and there were a lot of great discussions that were had while we hiked. There were also lots to see, like an old cabin where a poet had once stayed and old walls that hogs used to stay inside. I took some pictures there of the swampier areas, but the island was beautiful. Next. All right. There was a lot done every day. One day we had a marine biologist with us that we talked with while looking for critters during low tide. There was also a scientific illustrator that stayed on the island for the week that was sort of acted as like one of the counselors that were with us for the week. And we also had Christian Hagenlacher, an author that was also a counselor for the week. He was really inspiring to a lot of us by sharing a story about his big year and different things that happened during it and the book he wrote on it. And another day we painted turn decoys and learned through the week how decoys were used to attract birds and how that was also used to bring puffins back to the islands in Maine. All right, next. All right, so to the left, there's a picture of my friend holding a bug. Just some moments of memories from the week. There were also morning bird walks most days, and one of the days, the sun was so very orange and behind just enough clouds that we were able to look at it without hurting your eyes. And it was just like early in the morning, and getting up and seeing that was really awesome. Occasionally, usually during meal times, there was a red squirrel. There's a few red squirrels on the island, but one of them we called Fred. He would go atop his log or chair and yell very loudly. And one time, all my friends went over to take a picture, which I then took a picture of because it's funny. I think he's on the chair that's in the middle. Can't see the squirrel too well, but they're taking a picture of the squirrel. All right, next. To say we ate well is an understatement. The food there was delicious, and there was an emphasis on it being locally sourced. So that was great to hear. We had lobster Thursday night, and there were cute puffin eclairs for dessert. To the right is a picture of Christian sneaking up on Fred the squirrel to take a picture of him. At meals and throughout each day, I met new people, laughed with friends, and talked about things I'm passionate about, all while learning more about what we love and trading stories from back home. Looking back on it, I don't know if I've ever been happier than when I was at Hog Island. Next. I made a lot of memories on this trip and learned so much from many different people. There's just an extreme feeling of happiness and excitement with each day waking up that I spent on Hog Island. No matter who you are, even if you didn't like birds or nature at all, you would still feel included at Hog Island. It was awesome being around so many people that have such similar interests. And the people there, again, were very, very kind. A lot of us campers made very good friends that we were not lucky enough to have at home. It was very easy to get along with everyone because of how unique everyone was, but also at the same time, everything like they talked about was very relatable. I found renewed inspiration for pursuing ornithology, ecology, and scientific illustration as a career, and I look forward to what the future brings. I feel extraordinarily privileged to have received the scholarship that made this experience possible. My promise is to use what I've learned to help build a brighter tomorrow for future generations and to inspire them to take action as well. So I want to give a huge thank you to the Sawmill River Audubon members for this scholarship, and it is an honor to give this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, for being here with us. This was so great, Joe
Thank you.
said. Yeah, really well done. Thanks again. And our thanks to the Light family for starting this scholarship. And again, our greetings to David and Susan who are with us tonight. Certainly thinking of your parents as well, how much they would have enjoyed seeing Sam present. So thank you.
We have a question.
We do. You
What
want to
was
answer
your
that?
favorite
Good.
bird that you saw? I saw, well, a lot of birds. It's so easy to say puffins. You might have expected that I would have said puffins, and so I'll give you probably my second favorite bird I saw there was cedar waxwing, which although we do have them at home, they're one of my favorites, and so I like seeing those no matter like where I go.
Nice. And I'll read Susan Light's comment here. Thank you, Sam. I love seeing your photos and learning about your experiences. My brother Larry, who also loved nature and photography, would have loved this. Keep up the good work. All right. Thank you again, everybody. We're going to move on now in our talk, and with much thanks to Sam and to his parents for sharing him with us tonight. And we're going to step right into visiting Yellowstone. So, hey, Larry.
Sam, thanks. That was fantastic. I doubt I'll be able to come close, but binoculars are enough. Don't feel you got to get a camera. Everybody's
Okay.
going to want you to get a camera.
Thank you.
So, everybody enjoying their Kittle House dinner or no? Next year. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Yellowstone and the trip we did in May. As you may expect, it was postponed twice, from May 2020, then October 2020, and finally in early May, after those postponements and a lot of other events that occurred over that 14 months preceding it, 10 very, very COVID-wary folks, all vaccinated, were ready to go, and we set off for Yellowstone National Park in all its grandeur. I know Anne got a lot of props from Val, and every prop she gets, she deserves. If you ever do one of these longer trips, the logistics in putting it together are not so easy, and she does it with aplomb every time, and this was no exception. So that's our group in front of in front of the visitor center to Old Faithful, and we'll get back to Old Faithful a little later. Yellowstone is the oldest national park in our system. It's that big red spot there on the left map. The entire park actually extends into 3 states, a tiny bit in Idaho, a little bit more in Montana, and about 95% of it is in the state of Wyoming. By the way, it's not only the oldest park in our system, the US National Park System is the oldest in the world. The only larger park now in the lower 48 is Death Valley, which is fairly recent when it switched from a national monument to a national park. Most of the larger parks are in the state of Alaska. The map on the right shows pretty much our outline of our trip. Starting up top is north of the park, and you'll see Bozeman, and a little bit north of Bozeman, Montana, which is where the group met up. Bozeman is the home of Montana State University, which by many of its students is known as Trout University, because Montana is probably one of the great fly fishing places in the world. A lot of great fiction has come out of there. Perhaps a lot of you have seen the movie A River Runs Through It. Was filmed in that area, although the book takes place in a slightly different part of the state. Near Bozeman alone, you have the Madison River, the Gallatin River, the Jefferson River, the Shield River, and the Yellowstone River, which then flows all the way down up from the park, because the rivers in the west actually flow west to the coast. So here's a couple of rivers coming up. The Yellowstone on the left and the Shields River Valley. There's a lot of valleys around, in and around Bozeman. Bozeman's a cool little town. It's the home of the Museum of the Rockies. And actually now the home of Gibson Guitars, which you can visit if you do take a trip out to the area. It's got its own ski area called Bridger. It enjoys a small, thriving main street surrounded by valleys, mountains, university, so it's got a lot of stuff going on. On our first day, we did a little exploration on our own. And our second day, before we headed down to the park, we met up with two guides from the Sacagawea Audubon, the local Audubon in that Bozeman area, for a day of birding with John Parker and Luann Harris, including a stop at the headwaters of the Missouri River. That obviously is not one of our pictures, but it gives you the aerial view and the idea of what it's like there. Outside of Livingston, Montana, we hit several birding spots. And some of the birds we saw were regular in the east, and some were, for example, the harrier and the marsh wren on the bottom right, but others were uniquely western, like the yellow-headed blackbird, the American white pelican. And although we get phalaropes in non-breeding plumage, we did see them in their full beauty and breeding plumage on the trip in the ponds in and around the Bozeman, Livingston area. We also had in the same general area, I think, where we saw the pelican, we had western grebe and long-billed curlew, which just from its beak is a really cool bird, using it to dig for bugs. Additional birds we saw in that area were horned lark, sandhill crane, of which we saw many during the trip in migration further north, and some breeding in the area, and golden eagle and redhead duck. We even had a golden eagle on nest later on. Also during that day, Luann maintains a trail of bluebird boxes, as I know people do it in the east for the eastern bluebird, along these fence lines in the west. And you can kind of see there why Montana's big sky country. She maintains this series of boxes on this fence line, which is private property, but people allow these boxes to go up. And we were treated in one of the boxes, as you'll see in the next slide, to 6 eggs, and the mom, who Luann gently put in her hand and let us all get a very close look, and to look down into the box. So that was a real highlight for everybody to see that. And the western bluebirds are doing quite well out there. Next, we headed down to the park, down Highway 89 towards our home for the next 5 days, which was a lodge right outside the Yellowstone Park, the north entrance in Gardner, Montana. But Yellowstone is 9 million square kilometers, so there's actually 5 separate entrances to the park. This is the only one that's open year-round. A couple of them may be closing shortly as we get into October, as the snow starts to hit the area. This is the famous Roosevelt Arch, where a few of us got out, like many tourists do, hitting Yellowstone for the first time, at least from this entrance, and took our picture by the arch for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. Yellowstone was, I believe it's 1872. So it was spring in the Yellowstone, and we had some snow before our arrival, but with weather, we really, really lucked out. We had cool mornings and evenings, but the days were warm. I would certainly recommend that time of year to visit in May before it's inundated with tourists. And this summer, I don't know if anybody read about, even as far north as the Yellowstone, the temperatures were 100 degrees days on end. So, and traffic jams in the park can build to 3 or 4 hours. So think about a visit at a time other than July and August. And it wasn't that crowded. There was still wildlife in the valley. So those were all highlights of going in May. So the next 3 days were our days in the park with a guide that Ann hired. So we really had 2 guides, Ann, who's done several trips there, and our guy Josh from a company called Yellowstone Wild. Terrific. So we had his van and we had our own vehicle. So everybody had plenty of room to enjoy the comfort and had a window seat. And there's no underestimating, really, though, a local guide if the trip that you take allows for that, because they know places and can take you to places that you might not find on your own. Our first day, full day in the park, was spent in the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. It may not quite be the Grand Canyon of Arizona, but the waterfalls were really, really running strong, as were the rivers, as the snow melt is still going on well into May. The canyon is 24 miles long on the Yellowstone River as it flows northwest. And there's first the upper falls, and then there's the lower falls. After we spent a good deal of time walking and hiking around in the area, we headed off for our lunch at Yellowstone Lake. Yellowstone Lake is the largest lake at the elevation of 8,000 feet in the country. Because the ice reaches 3 feet in depth in the winter, there's still ice. We were there mid-May. There's still ice on the lake into June before it completely thaws out. There's pockets that are open even in the winter because of the thermal pools, but it's a huge lake, and we set up and had a beautiful lunch there, which our guide actually put out every day. A beautiful lunch every day. And among the birds and animals we saw on the first full day in the park were Cassin's finch, similar to finches we have here, but a unique species to the west. Mountain chickadee, again, somewhat similar to our chickadee here, black-capped chickadee, but again, slightly different. And then common raven, which we do have here. Broadwing hawk, which actually was rare, marked rare in that area in May. Clark's nutcracker and Brewer's blackbird, similar to our rusty, I guess, but that's the very common bird in the West, the Brewer's blackbird. And we saw many of those on the trip. Interestingly, there's almost no crows in the area. Raven and black-billed magpie were quite common. This is a harlequin duck, probably one of our most beautiful species of waterfowl. Oddly, in the wintertime, they're found along the ocean, and a good place to see them, if you'd like to see them in the plumage is quite similar in the winter, is down in Barnegat Lighthouse in Long Beach Island, New Jersey. But their summer breeding grounds are along fast-moving rivers. In fact, it's almost like they surf on the rocks. catching bugs and stuff. But anyway, we were treated to probably 20 or 30 of these pooled in together on one of our stops. We also had a few mammals that day, probably the biggest disparity in size. We had the least chipmunk on the left and the bison on the right. And they are quite large, quite common in the park. They kind of often lope along the road, creating traffic jams. We were stopped, I think, once for a good 20, 25 minutes waiting for the bison to cross the road. They're in no hurry, even if you are, so no reason to beep them. On our way back that day, Steve caught this picture of 3 grizzlies. I think we were going about 50 miles an hour. He caught this out the window, so that was quite exciting for everybody. Then we make it back to our lodge, and park days, you know, we start early, probably up at 5, in the vans by 6, some days earlier than that. And restaurants in the area, you know, and throw the COVID on top of that, were not that plentiful. And Anne was able to arrange with a local cook to come in, so we'd get back 4:30 in the afternoon. And instead of having to hustle up, get ready to go out again, back into the vans for dinner, we brought in a cook who made appetizers and then dinner and dessert, and we could go out and hang on the gazebo. That's right next to our lodge there, right on the river, the Yellowstone River, and we could bird on the property. And we had a number of birds just right on our property that were very exciting. We got Brewer's blackbirds on the wire. We have yellow rump warbler. If you notice the throat on this bird, the throat is yellow. That's a common bird we have both in spring and fall migration here. They breed further north, but we have the myrtle form, which has the throat is white. There's an occasional overlap, white, you know, myrtles in the west, Audubons in the east, but almost exclusively they stay on their territories. We had mountain bluebird nesting on our property, and as well as perhaps the most drab warbler in our in North America, the orange crowned warbler on the upper left. That's a rare bird in the east, common there. Their common swallow is the violet green swallow, which we had in several stops, and also the ubiquitous red-tailed hawk, which we all know here from driving on the highway. The second guided day, we headed out quite early, about a 2-hour ride to the Lamar Valley. We stopped for a little break on our way there, and that's the day. The Lamar Valley is where the big mammals are, but we got a smaller one. We got this beautiful coyote as we made a little pit stop on our 2-hour drive out there. It was the first mammal of the day. And then it was down into the Lamar Valley. Oh, I forgot the scones. We were eating scones. So let's move on to the Lamar Valley, which is a huge expanse. And people park along the side of the road, set up scopes, set up their large cameras, and the animals will come towards you, but it's a very large area. We were able to see a family of wolves quite far out, gray wolves, although this is a black morph of the gray wolf, and some pups. They were a little too far to really get pictures of them. We were able to see them in the scope. I think that's the male and female there, Steve. Maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think that's right. Really hard to see the gray one.
I think there were 3 pups, and that was the first day, I believe, in May that they had been seen. I think they come down into the valley and a little earlier, obviously, to breed, and they had popped up just maybe the day before. So we were lucky to see that. Got a grizzly bear. You'll see right next to it, clearly not bothered, nonplussed by the grizzly bear, is a sandhill crane that you wouldn't have seen at naked eye. You would have seen the grizzly, but with the scopes and binoculars and Steve's wonderful camera, you could see the crane just hanging out with the grizzly bear. To some bison, also breeding at that time of year. It's the time of year that all of these animals are breeding, which keeps them in the valley. And as the temperatures rise through the end of May, June, a lot of them, bears and wolves, will head further up into the higher elevations of the Yellowstone and away from some of the people. although there are encounters, certainly through the summer. Again, another reason to go into May. The calves are called red dogs, the little guys. Very cute. After the Lamar Valley, we made a few exploratory trips to other parts of the park, and you see how spread apart the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone is, the Lamar Valley, and then where we go the next day, which is to the geyser area. But we saw pronghorn. One common bird on the trip was the western meadowlark. Song is slightly different than the east, very similar looking bird, beautiful bird. We heard its song all the time. And again, another gorgeous shot of a mountain bluebird. The next day, our last full day with the guide, was our day to see the geysers in the park, to the Norris Basin, which is the hottest, oldest, and the most dynamic of Yellowstone's thermal areas. There are thermal areas throughout the park, but this designated area, the Norris Geyser, is where most of the photographs that you might have seen of the geysers and other thermal hotspots in the park. There are mud holes, hot springs, mud pots, steam vents, fumaroles, and geysers. And to understand really the scope of this, when Yellowstone blew up about 600,000 years ago, the ash was spewing more than 1,000 miles away, all the way to Kansas, Utah, and Iowa. So it is an active fault, on an active fault, and these are active thermal activity going on all the time. I'm not saying it could happen anytime, but I guess it could, and probably will at some point in the universe's history. But I get repeating myself, another reason the May is such a good time is there's these walkways along all of these, this thermal activity. Here's a mud pot, and nothing was that crowded. So you could take a walk, you could stop, you didn't feel pressured to move too fast past any of these features. Finally, I guess after we did the loop around, we got back to Old Faithful, who blows itself up every, about 55 minutes to an hour and 20. And it's reliable. And we were able to sit in an area, pretty much just our group, watching spectacular geyser do its thing. So while there are other geysers in the park, some even larger, you can always count on Old Faithful. Does not disappoint. And well, we'll take our 30 seconds and watch her go. It goes for well over a minute, I think close to 2 minutes, but we just shot a little bit of it and we'll move on. What's interesting, when you walk around this boardwalk, you see signs everywhere. And I mean everywhere, don't go off the boardwalk, don't go off the trail. But every year people do, and it makes a difficult job for CSI because there's nothing left when they have to get them out of there. Maybe a pair of shoes. So stay on the path. On our drive back to the lodge that night, or late afternoon, we were really treated to this beautiful 3 moose loping along one of the valleys. Interestingly, while there are plenty of moose in Yellowstone, you don't encounter them that often. You go south maybe 40, 50 miles from the southern entrance to Grand Teton, they're much more common. The habitat is a little better for them, but this was a great sighting, excited us all. And if you think bison are big, these guys are even bigger. So that was a wonderful sighting for us. And it was also a really interesting day in the park for birds. This is an American dipper, favorite bird of many. This is a bird that hangs out on really rapidly moving water. So the water will just run completely over its body. It'll dive into the river to catch insects and then pop back up. And it's on its eyes to keep them covered. It actually has these feathers. So may give you an image of someone on a street corner, blind person, but those are actually feathers, not its nictitating membrane. So it's pretty cool to see. And with the cameras nowadays, when you can rapid fire, if you do that, you can catch this shot, which I think Steve did. It's wonderful, wonderful picture. I think it was a lot of people's favorite bird on the trip. I know it was on the wish list for everybody, and we were able to get really close-up looks. But we also saw a few other nice birds that day, both in the park and back at the lodge. Bullock's oriole, the junco, if you notice, which should be coming back to us very soon, sometime in October, but they have the pink on the side. It's a same species, but a different form called the Oregon form. And there's another nice shot of a violet green swallow. Back to our lodge, say goodbye to Josh. And then the next day, we were kind of on our own. We had vehicles back at the lodge that we had taken down from Bozeman. And so we split up a little bit. Some people explored the Mammoth Hot Springs, which was actually closest to the entrance that we came in Gardner. Almost looks like the inside of a cave, inside out, I guess. 2 tons of calcium carbonate flow through the hot springs daily. And as a result, this travertine, a type of limestone, flourishes in the area. Very, very cool feature of the park. There are so many. The park is huge and it's got such incredible diversity. A few others of us, we took a hike, about a 6-7 mile hike on up to a loop trail to a place called Beaver Ponds. Most trails, interestingly, I'm not quite sure why, are up and back trails, probably because of the difficult topography making loop trails. But this was a nice loop trail. We were warned 2 things by our guide, and take it to heart. Don't hike alone in the Yellowstone, and do buy bear spray. Hopefully you'll never have to use it. We had Steve watch the YouTube because he knows how to do that tech stuff. So he was able to watch a YouTube video and had him carry the spray. And fortunately, we never used it. There were 4 of us who went on this hike. And also, I remembered also, if you don't have bear spray, make sure somebody slower than you is with you. But so during this hike, we saw some wonderful features, particularly this sandhill crane on its nest. What they do while they're migrating, before they get to their nest, when they're feeding in those big valleys, is they'll rub themselves in mud, and it's thought to, so that's not their natural color, they're more gray. It's thought to camouflage themselves when they're on the nest. I don't know how they camouflage that red dot on their head, but as you can see, it kind of works with the body. It blends in quite well. And on this trail, we also had 2 species of grouse. We had ruffed grouse, which is a bird we do get here up in the North Country, in northern Adirondacks and northern Vermont. You can still maybe get them in fawn stock, but not too often in our area now. Extirpated from Westchester County for sure. I'm not sure when the last one was seen. And then we had these really close encounter with dusky grouse, doing its puffed up thing, making its noise, walking with that stiff upper tail. We probably got within 6-7 feet of this bird, completely unconcerned, just doing its strutting to try and please the females. So they were just unconcerned about our presence. So it was a life bird for me, and I'm pretty sure it's several people that saw it that day. We had many other good birds on that hike, including another look at Clark's nutcracker and another look at the chickadee. And these were at the higher elevations. At lower elevations on that trail is about 7,000 feet. So the 5 or 6 days before we took such a long walk getting us acclimated to that, those kinds of elevation was pretty helpful. We have both western and eastern kingbirds in fairly close proximity, not quite that close, but right in and outside the park. And then back at the lodge, we had this bird right outside our cabin, and also another close picture of a yellow rump warbler that was there. So that night, that was our final night in the park. Anne had planned a beautiful dinner in a wonderful private room at the Chico Hot Springs Resort, which is an old bar, restaurant, and resort in the town of Prey, Montana. Stopped in the bar, which is frequented by several celebrities, businessmen, actors, musicians who live in the area. Jeff Bridges, John Mayer, and some others who have lived in the past, Peter Fonda, in the Paradise Valley, which is outside the Yellowstone, and where a lot of these folks buy up these big spreads and spend their downtime. So hopefully all of you will get back on the road to somewhere soon, and the COVID will drift away and we'll be able to travel a little bit more. We were really fortunate to get to go on this trip in May. And so come back again and see us, and good night from the ground squirrel. Thank you.
Thank you again, Larry and Steve. So Phil and Ellen, are you ready? Somebody look them up. Oh yeah, Ardit said fabulous presentation on the Yellowstone trip and gorgeous photos. Thanks, Larry and Steve, from Ed Elliott, another one of our travelers. Great. And those pictures, yeah, they were pictures by Steve. There's Phil and Ellen. Folks, we're going to shuffle them up and do a drawing.
There you go.
Phil is reaching inside, pulling out a slip.
Cynthia Ofer.
Great. Cynthia Ofer is the winner of this beautiful quilt. I don't know if Cynthia's on with us tonight, but we'll get the quilt to her. And we want to give big thanks to Jean Sparrison for creating this beautiful quilt. A little bird told me that Patricia Lequette is already queued up our quilt for next year.
Quilt
So
rate
we,
$1,120 this year.
could you say that amount again?
It's $1,120.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, everybody that bought tickets, because you helped support us as well. To conclude our gathering tonight, some images from the past year, and then we'll say goodnight. So we want to encourage you to connect with us this fall, even as many of you have done over the past year. And we want to thank you also for gathering with us tonight. Thanks very much, everybody, and good night.